So the ZV-E10 is a great budget camera, and today we're going to talk about how to make that budget camera better through the use of lenses and attachments. The Sony ZV-E10 can be purchased with a kit lens option, but the kit lens option is not really a great option for content creation. It works, it's light, it's got some power zoom features, but if you really want to make your content look good, you're going to want to take advantage of the fact that the ZV-E10 does have an interchangeable lens system. The first lens we're going to talk about is the Sigma 16mm 1.4 DCDN with a 67mm filter thread. I use this lens all the time for landscape video where you want that wide angle to give you that big field of view. And with its 1.4 minimum aperture, it is a great lens to use in low light. So this is my go-to lens for landscape work because of its wide angle, because of its low light performance, and because it has a really nice, clean image. And this lens is about $400. With any lens, you're going to spend a little bit of money if you want to get a decent lens. But as lenses go, this is a fairly inexpensive yet high quality option. The second lens we're going to cover today is the Sigma 18-50 zoom lens with a 2.8 constant aperture. Now this lens is great because, like the Sigma 1.4 16mm, it's a relatively inexpensive lens. I believe it's also around $400. I purchased all this gear with my own money. This is not a sponsored video. So it basically starts at the 18mm, which basically means it picks up where this 16 leaves off, and then it will take you all the way up to 50. It is a good all-around lens that you can pretty much carry with you as a main day-to-day lens. So with these two lenses combined with the ZV-E10 body, you really do increase the usefulness of your ZV-E10 way beyond what you get with the kit lens. So with this camera, you simply open up your camera mount, and it's best to keep your camera facing sideways or down to keep anything from falling into the sensor. And you open up your lens mount, and you see there's a white dot there and a white dot here. You just join the white dots together, and then you twist. And when you hear the click, you've got the lens mounted correctly. So now I'm going to take this lens off, and we're going to look at some attachments for this camera. So the very first attachment I would recommend after the lenses is going to be this small rig cage, which is basically a metal frame that will hold the camera. They tend to have better grips. This one, for example, has a nice silicone grip that sticks out. They provide additional protection for the camera. They provide many attachment points where they have a built-in Arca Swiss plate, which will allow you to mount this cage directly to a tripod. So to mount the camera in the cage, it is always best to mount it with a lens off, and in some cases you have to because the lens, if it's wide enough, will not fit through the cage. You simply slide it in to the camera cage, and it will just sort of fit right in there. And once it's in, you simply take your screwdriver or your penny or whatever you're using, and you just turn it until the camera sits tightly in the cage. And then once you have that, you have a really nice mounted ZV-E10 that is very secure. I find this grip to be much more usable. Once you have the ZV-E10 mounted into this cage, then you have the option to add additional attachments using the screw points. The first attachment I like to mount and that I recommend with this camera is this clamp, but also by Small Rig. This mounts to any point where you have two screws. Now on this particular cage, it really only mounts well to the left side or to the right side. And there's a bit of a drawback to either side, and it just sort of depends what you're using the camera for at any given time. If you choose to mount this to the left side, that is where the side door is, which gives you access to the ports and the headphone jack, and also up here the microphone jack. So if you put this right on top there, you do lose some access. The doors will still open part way, but it can be difficult to plug in your actual cables into the ports. If you mount the clamp on this side, so the grip is here, and if you mount the clamp, the grip becomes less usable. Now, for me, that's the lesser of the two problems. So that's where I choose to mount. The grip is on this side here. So to mount the clamp on this side is a pretty straightforward process of just lining up the screws, using your tool, and tightening down so things are secure. And now you have your clamp mounted to the right side. Again, your problem here is using that grip. My second attachment to the cage is a top handle. So top handles are really nice because they give you an additional way to carry and use the camera, and I find the top handles are generally easier to shoot with if you have articulating screens. If you don't have articulating screens, they can be very difficult. But the ZV-E10 does have an articulating screen, so once again we are taking advantage of the functionality, the capability of the ZV-E10. You now have another way to carry the camera that does not rely on the grip. And you can use the articulating screen, turn it up, and you film the camera like this. Or you can just use the handle to carry the camera. The third attachment I like to use is also by Small Rig, which is this short friction arm. Now, Small Rig makes these friction arms in different sizes, though I prefer the smaller ones in most situations. So to attach these is pretty simple. You have screws at either end, and you can choose whichever end you want. They can be a little bit difficult to actually screw in because everything moves on these things, so I tend to prefer to lock the arm lightly, just so the arm isn't moving. And then once the arm is locked, it's simply a matter of choosing a point on your camera, and I usually choose this bottom one, and just rotate the arm in place until it tightens down. And then once it tightens down, you can loosen the friction arm and then maneuver the arm into whatever position you prefer. And again, this thing can move into almost any position, so it's totally up to you. Find the position that you like, tighten the arm, and now you have a point where you can mount a microphone or a monitor screen. And then for my last attachment I like to use on these, one of the issues with once you mount the camera cage is the lack of good cold shoe mounts. So there's one on the camera, but that gets kind of blocked when you put this cage on. It can be hard to get things that slide all the way in to actually go there. There's a little sort of half cold shoe right here, but things tend to slide out of it. It doesn't lock in too well. And then there is something else on the bottom here. However, Small Rig also makes cold shoe mounts that you can mount to any place on the camera where you have your screw attachment. And I like to put it right here on top of this side one, and then we can just tighten down with our tool. We now have a really nice cold shoe mount, which can be used for, again, a microphone or whatever you're looking for. And one of the nice things about this cold shoe mount is that it's actually keyed. On the front side here, you have an opening where you can slide in your cold shoe. But on this side here, it's actually locked, which makes it much more secure than, say, this mount here where there's no such locking option. This handle also has a locking cold shoe on it on the top here. This gives you two really good cold shoe options that you can use to mount accessories. And let's just put a lens on here to sort of see the final product. Let's put on the 16mm. So here you have a really nice setup for your ZV-E10. And you've basically given it a lot more functionality. This would probably be, what, $800 for the camera, $400 for the lens, $1,200. So this is probably maybe $1,400 if you were to buy it all brand new and retail. This is the way I use my ZV-E10 most of the time, in some configuration, either identical to this is my most common configuration, or in similar ones that may change slightly depending on what I'm doing. In the next video, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to use all these attachments, because we have these places to put things, but we haven't really put anything there yet. So we'll be talking about that in the next video.